And there's nearly always some people on the team who are just different. You can't read them, or they come from a different starting position, or they see the world in a different way. And I think as our world has become increasingly complex, the start point for me, for leaders, is actually, rather than discounting those people, go and find their frequency. Because in a complex world, in a fast-moving world, we've got to tap into collective intelligence. And if we only tap into the people who reinforce the views that we have, we're missing an awful lot.
Welcome to What's Possible, where leadership thrives. I'm Ilene Schaffer, and I'm glad you're here. Behind every powerhouse communicator and relationship builder is a strategic thinker who leads with curiosity. Because of that, we believe that your journey to becoming the best leader starts with you. Have you ever met someone and immediately felt like they just got you? You know, that instant feeling of connection and understanding? Imagine if we could consistently create that kind of powerful, authentic resonance with everyone on our teams, especially in today's fast-paced, increasingly virtual world. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome SVC leadership coach, principal business psychologist, and certified practitioner of applied neuroscience, Paul Chudleigh. Paul is here to help us unpack the concept of leadership resonance. We're going to dive into how leaders can genuinely tune into their teams, building trust, psychological safety, and high-performing, resilient cultures. Whether you're navigating remote meetings or simply want deeper connections with your team, Paul's insights will help you become the resonant leader your team needs. So come on, let's jump on in and discover what's possible. Paul Chudleigh, welcome to What's Possible.
Thank you, Ilene. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I am thrilled to have you join us. Today, we will be talking about leadership resonance, but I have to say, we just had you do an in-house for all of our coaches on emotional intelligence and how we connect with one another and our emotions and emotion regulation even more deeply. And it was phenomenal. And so I am so excited to hear what you have to say around leadership resonance. And I am thinking we need a part 2 to dive more into emotion regulation.
Okay, well, that's really nice. And funnily enough, there is a significant link between emotion regulation and resonance in leadership. So maybe that's okay. That's okay.
So we'll touch it there. And of course, Paul and I talked before we hopped on recording, and I didn't ask him about doing that part 2. I decided to wait till we're recording so that he has no other option but to say, yes, I'd be delighted to come back for a second episode. So before we get too deep in today's topic of leadership resonance, Paul, will you talk to us about who you are as a human? I always like my guests to talk more about what we don't know, that we can't find on LinkedIn, that we can't maybe find if we did a deep Google search on Paul. Tell us about the human behind all of that stuff.
So the human, Paul, is reflecting, because I moved home recently, and it's kind of like the end of a bit of a journey for me. So I started my life in London, right in a big city, spent the first 30 years of my life there. Then I moved to a small town out of England and into Wales, at a place called Chepstow, which is on the English-Welsh border. And I finally made the final step to a place that's a Welsh word for small mountain and is a village overlooking lots of scenery. So I finally made that transition from city boy to country boy. And I'm still just loving the fact that I can go outside at night and there are owls hooting and I can see the stars, and it's just a completely different way of life. The young me would never have imagined that I would end up somewhere here. So I think John Lennon once said, life's what happens when you're busy making other plans. So here I am.
Oh, I love that. I'm curious, what do you love most about being there? You get nature. What else?
It's really strange to me as like a dyed-in-the-wool city boy. It's the silence, like just the quietness of going and sitting in the garden, and just that nothingness, that ability to just really just dial down everything and just kind of sit peacefully and just allow myself to kind of rejuvenate a little bit. It's a really precious thing. And I hadn't realized quite how precious it was until I kind of actually sat here and thought, oh, this is where I live now, which is kind of a strange thing to say, but you do have these realizations, don't you? Like, oh.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. And you do. It's funny you say that the young boy would never think that that's where you might land. But as we get more wisdom with time, shall we say, and age, it makes sense. And, it's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking we've had several people come talk about stress reduction, kind of supporting people around feeling burnout, mindfulness, all of these things that we are trying to integrate into this normal busy life. And what I'm hearing is that this has become your norm now. What we talk about is try to integrate moments of mindfulness. You get to have extended periods of mindfulness just by walking out your door.
Absolutely. And I do feel kind of really blessed that that's the case. I know that's not always possible for everybody at different points in their lives. So I'm really grateful for the fact that I've managed to land here.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy for you, and I will look forward to a visit sometime.
So you are more than welcome. We'll roll out the red carpet for you, Ilene.
So now that you've given us kind of this beautiful view of kind of where we can envision you living and being, give us a nugget of the professional side, just so people know who we're talking to before we dive into Leadership Resonance.
Sure. So I'm a principal business psychologist. Now that term is a two-edged sword. So one, it means I'm kind of experienced. Two, it also means I'm old enough to have qualified to become a principal business psychologist, which is a kind of real downside, but there we go.
But that old enough allowed you to now live where you're living. So if you think about it,
sometimes we want it all, don't we?
Right, exactly. Be young and yes.
That's right. So principal business psychologist, I'm an exec coach. I run leadership programs. I do team coaching activity, and occasionally I do a bit of mediation and conflict resolution where we've got individuals or teams who have found themselves in a really difficult space. But I prefer the leadership development stuff. So I'd like to teach people how to do conflict resolution better so that I don't have to do any mediation. It's the least pleasant work that I do. So I'm trying to make myself redundant in that space.
So being proactive so we don't get to the other side. Yeah, exactly. Love it.
Exactly.
So diving into Leadership Resonance, I always ask my guests, pick the topic that really is just top of mind, that gets you excited to talk about. And this is what you came back with. And so I'm curious if you can first define it and then let us know what's getting you so intrigued by Leadership Resonance.
Okay. I think it's an antidote for me, resonance, to some of the problems that we see in some organizations and in some relationships. Because resonance at its heart is all about finding someone else's frequency, understanding the kind of vibrational plane that they vibrate at, finding that, understanding it, and building real authentic connection with them, which is a really special thing. And for me, that's really what sits at the heart of true leadership. If you haven't got that connection, nothing else really follows. Everything's going to be slightly out of whack, if I can kind of use that phrase. And we're in a world now where we're pushing down roots of AI. We're having more remote interactions with people. There's a lot about human progress at the moment that seems to be about substituting real relationship. Now, there's a place for all those new things in the world in which we live, but actually, rather than diminishing the importance of those really deep, rich, powerful relationships, I think it actually promotes the fact that in those times that we do have with people, finding that route to connection is just so incredibly important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm curious about that with things like AI, and we're obviously doing this on a screen across from each other. How do you cultivate that resonance? Because it is different than in person.
It is. And our brain is constantly processing lots and lots of data about people. And when we're on Zoom, there are just certain things, or Teams, whatever the virtual platform might be, there are always going to be bits of data that we can't pick up. So we're not going to see like the whole profile of the body language. We're not going to quite see some of the ways that we react. But we shouldn't discount the fact there's a lot of behavioral data that you can see. I can see your eye contact. I can see your facial expressions. I can see some of the movements of the body language. I can hear the inflections in your voice. I can hear where you're emphasizing or de-emphasizing certain things. And so I think rather than discounting the fact that all of that stuff is not possible on Zoom, I think it's making the most of what is possible and then just using curiosity. So if you're seeing something or hearing something, and we've known each other a little while now and we've interacted a lot, I now have enough data about you to kind of think, Ilene doesn't quite seem like herself today. That usual zizz isn't there. That usual like full-on commitment to drive forward isn't. I'm not quite hearing that today. And to answer that with a question, hey, Ilene, are you okay today? Is there anything going on with you that it's useful to talk about? It's making the most of what we have, I think, rather than saying, well, I'm not in the room with someone, so therefore I don't have any access to what I need to form that resonant relationship.
Yeah, I really like that. It's, it gets back to what we talk about in positive psychology. It's like, where we focus grows. And so if we decide I'm going to focus on this is the medium that we're using, and how can I look at what's good about it and what's working? And yes, are there other alternatives like being in person where we really can connect on a different level? Yes, there are alternatives that might feel better at different times. At the same time, I love all these different cues and clues that you're talking about. And I had recently Robert Biswas-Diener and Christian Van Nurburg on the podcast talking about their new book, Radical Listening. And one of the things that I like that they talk about is how we internalize that interrupting is rude and poor behavior. And Robert argues, we interrupt all day long. I'm talking right now and you're shaking your head. That is an interruption, but it's a positive interruption because now I'm seeing you and I realize you're with me and you're connected to what I'm saying and you're shaking your head up and down. So you might be agreeing. Sometimes people say, they might not even say words, but they have some kind of something coming out that shows that they're with you. And that's what I also hear in what you're talking about is what are those little interruptions, if you will, even when somebody is speaking that show that you're listening across the screen.
Yeah, and I think you can put those things to incredibly powerful good use. I mean, you imagine you're leading someone, it might be a one-on-one session like this, or it might be a group session, and one of the members of the team is making a contribution, but you can feel they're a little bit hesitant, they're a little bit unsure. Using some of that kind of sub-vocalization and the nods and that, take a moment, or those little signals that say to that person, it's okay, finish the thought, draw it out. We've got some time here. We've got some patience, is a way of kind of detecting those clues and those cues, as you mentioned, and thinking, but I'm not interrupting the extent of cutting them short, not enabling them to, put a great thought into the world. But what I can do is encourage that to almost create some fertile ground. But you have to see the data and realize what might that person need from me in this moment. And maybe if my interruption just slows things down for a moment or two for that person's thoughts to reorganize in a way that they feel more confident about. Right. For me, that's resonance. You're finding that's where that person is. That's what they need from me right now. In an hour's time, they might be in a different place and need something completely different from me. But it's that mindful awareness of what do I think? What's my best estimate of what that person needs from me at this moment? And those things, they build long-term trust. The fact that even at an unconscious level, the person realizes, you might have seen me struggling, and what you did is you helped me out in a way that was honoring and respectful, and it wasn't parent-child in its interaction. It's like one adult holding up another adult because they believed that if they held them up, that person would have something great to give. Those things, I think, burn themselves deep into our sense of, can I trust this other human being?
Yeah, well, and it brings in that psychological safety topic that we often talk about. And it brings in psychological safety, which we know is so important for leaders and teams to thrive, to feel that safety, to feel that someone has your back. Now, I'm curious, how do you bring this into either your one-to-one coaching or when you're working with an organization? How do you teach this?
Yes, I mean, it's interesting because the origins of this, the book on primal leadership, so by Boyatzis, Coleman and Goldman, sorry, let me try that again, if we can just cut that, Boyatzis, okay. Goldman and McKee. It's been around for more than 20 years, and I kind of loved it back then, but as neuroscience has revealed more and more to us about the workings of the brain, actually this idea of attunement between different individuals has really come back to the forefront, certainly for me, and I think for other people, just this idea of how can you find that connection between people. And I think for a lot of leadership developments focused much more on kind of the process of leadership, or these are the attributes you need to demonstrate as a leader, or this is your orientation towards people, like I'm a servant leader, or I'm kind of traditional leader in this situation. What I love about resonant leadership and what I try to teach individuals that I coach is just those little skills for finding someone's frequency. So just for noticing where someone is. And it is a mindful skill, but also that you don't need to be a dyed-in-the-wool psychologist to do this, because sometimes when you pick up on a clue or a cue, you just need to ask a question. So if you get the sense that, someone isn't fully committed to a way forward, but rather than replying with a statement like, you don't seem like your heart's in this, ask a question. Yeah? What's your commitment to this thing feeling like in this moment? And then you can just have good follow-ups, can't you? Like, what is exciting you? What's making you more hesitant? What can we do that would position this for you that you feel you could more fully, just dive straight in and go for it? So for me, it's just that ability to give people, it's confidence really, isn't it? Because what I sometimes feel is that people don't ask questions in their leadership because they're afraid that they won't have the answers. And actually, that's a way to just really distance disconnected relationships with people. So I think there's two parts here, isn't it? I think I'm pointing towards. The first part is notice what you see and try and tune into what's going on there. But secondly, the confidence to think, well, when I do notice something and something does crop up, I don't automatically have to be like the leader on the white horse charging in with the answer. We can talk about it and we can explore it, and we don't necessarily have to come up with the answer in the moment, but that sense of you noticed, you connected, you asked, you explored, I don't feel judged, I just feel understood, is a foundation for a really good relationship going forward. And inevitably, when you look at the type of leader that anyone wants to work for, is someone that tries to get you, tries to understand you.
Well, at the end of the day, it kind of everything gets back to relationship, right? And to people and to caring for one another. And I'm going to ask you a question. I'll first give an example. Senya, who is the founder of our company, she and I work very close together as thought partners, bouncing ideas back and forth. And she's very good at, she might have an idea and she is in tune with me. And granted, we've worked together for years and years now, but she'll say, Ilene, I'm sensing this is not landing with you, and we have Senya, who is very aware, and she's resonant leader, shall we say, and me, who, as everybody says, I couldn't lie to save my life. You could see everything on my face. And so you have two people. You have one who is very skilled at calling it out and saying, hey, Ilene, I'm sensing this is not landing with you. And then you've got me, which is a very easy subject because you can see it and anyone could see it on my face. What about those people who aren't like Senya, who are very sensitive and in tune to how people are feeling, and they're not dealing with someone like me who maybe is more, they keep their cards really close to their chest? What would you recommend to the leader in terms of how to start to learn to become a resonant leader and be aware of things, and how to work with an employee who maybe does not have everything written on their face?
Sure. That is a really insightful question, actually, because very often when I'm talking to groups or individuals, when you're leading a team, invariably there will be some people who operate at a frequency that's pretty close to yours, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it's kind of easy to find that frequency. You're on the same page on a lot of things. Your start points from different positions are kind of pretty similar. And so therefore it's, there's not a great deal of adjustment required on either part. But then there's nearly always some people on the team who are just different. You can't read them, or they come from a different starting position, or they see the world in a different way. And I think as our world has become increasingly complex, the start point for me, for leaders, is actually, rather than discounting those people, go and find their frequency. Because in a complex world, in a fast-moving world, we've got to tap into collective intelligence. And if we only tap into the people who reinforce the views that we have, we're missing an awful lot. So firstly, there's that commitment to, it's really great to go off and find someone else. Secondly, you have to suspend that sense of being judgmental about people. So the fact that as I approach you and try to connect you and understand with you, it can never come from that vibe of prove yourself to me. You've got a different take on this, justify it. It needs to come from that place of, do you know what? We see these things differently, and I'm really interested in what you have to say. So almost that genuine sense of curiosity, of authenticity, and of receptiveness. Actually, what you say may change what I think and what I do. And then just use good questions. What do you think?
Yeah.
Why do you think that? What do you think I'm missing as a leader? What ideas do you have that could take something that's good and make it really great? And it's that kind of positive line of questioning that's genuinely open and receptive that I think pulls people out. And then it's what you do with it. So if someone makes a great point, let it change you. If someone augments your idea, build it in and give them the credit for it. And it kind of completes the loop that when the next time that I come to you and I'm being curious and interested and I'm seeing your difference as genuine value to me, that you've been through the cycle enough times to think, Ilene means that, Paul means that, they're genuinely interested. And now my sense of belonging increases as well, which is another element of resonance. When you look at the 4 resonant kind of approaches, is have a vision, which is the bit that we kind of all know, be really invested in growing people. So if I sense that my leader is someone who's genuinely interested in making me the best that I can be, we've got that. But then we've got 2 others. One is that people have input to decision making. They feel that they can pull the levers that influence decisions. But also, resonant leaders look at the emotional climate of the team. They're interested in how people are feeling. And if we can make people who think differently from us feel included, feel like they matter, feel like they have a part to play, then again, you can then get resonant relationships in the team that you lead as well. You don't get all of this, the people who are allied with the leader and the people who are not. What we're trying to create is that sense. It's the difference that's going to make us powerful.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was a really long answer to a really precise question.
No, it was a great answer. And I love how you talked about, particularly for those people who are on your team who might be more reserved, who you do need to draw things out. And that's super helpful. I'm going to go back to a really basic thing that you said. You said for the leader to go find the frequency. What do you mean by that? And how do they do it? So for the leader who's like, what are you talking about? I don't know the frequency of my team. I don't know what frequency even is. It's the most core to what we're talking about. So can you explain?
Yeah, I'm rather than thinking that this is some kind of supernatural thing, obviously frequency is more of a metaphor.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we almost think about it from the perspective of why does this person why does their heart beat? What excites them? What is meaningful to them? What values do they have? What ideas do they have? And it's really tuning into that, if that makes sense. It's almost looking at the person as a person of value and thinking, how can I connect with them in a way that I can enable them to bring that value? So there is the start point for me on this. There's a way that you look at people. And one of my close friends who I've been friends with for more than 30 years is a lady called Karen Gibson. And Karen is the choir director for the Kingdom Choir. So she sang at Harry and Meghan's wedding. It was her choir that was singing there. And she works a lot with young people, and sometimes some young people in some really challenging circumstances. And she has this belief that just flows through her, which is, when I look at people, I look for the gold. There's this sense, there's a seam of gold in everyone, and it's my job to come and bring out that gold. So I think the start point for leaders is the way that you look at people. Can you look for that gold? And then in your interactions with them, make it safe, make it really safe. And then be genuinely, as I said, interested and curious in what that person has to bring, even if it's different, and let it sit with you. Let it impact you and affect you. And people can sense that. People can see if a leader is going through that consultation that means nothing or collaboration that's meaningful. And that sense is there. But do those two things make sense, Ilene? It's like the way that you look at someone is important, because so much of what happens afterwards comes from the way that you look at that person. A pain in the neck that you need to get around, or a person with some gold in them, and it's our job as leaders to bring out the gold.
Yeah, I love that. That is such a beautiful image. That statement, look for the gold, it brings me back to another statement, which is very different, but I think the two things together really could dramatically impact and influence how we lead. Christian Van Nurburg, he says, remember, everybody is going through something. And so as a leader, if we can remember everybody, all of our people on our team, including ourselves, are going through something, and I'm going to still look for the gold. I love that.
Yeah. And that's interesting. That's really making me think, Ilene, because you think about, over the years, we've coached hundreds, if not thousands of people in leadership positions. And the number of times, I think, in which we've bumped into people who don't see the gold in themselves. Maybe they're wrestling with imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon. Maybe they are really focused on all the things that they don't bring rather than the great stuff that they do bring. And leaders that help people to see that gold in themselves, you just release so much potential, don't you? When someone just suddenly gets the wind in their sails and starts to think, I've spent so long thinking about what I'm not, I've completely missed what I am, what I can bring. And leaders who help people find that, wow.
Oh gosh, Paul, that's beautiful. So as we wrap up, what is possible when somebody becomes a resonant leader?
You've asked such good questions today, Ilene. And the fact I've had to think about that is just because it's a really good question, right?
Thank you.
I think there's a number of things. The first is you can enter a new depth of relationship with different people, and maybe those that you've held at a little bit of a distance or are being unsure about. When you find their frequency, you can just have a whole new a depth of relationship, a quality of relationship that you haven't seen. Secondly, you can discover enormous amounts that are outside of your field of vision. As a leader, if you're not resonant, if you're dissonant, if people are fearful and just feel like they're a human resource rather than a human being, they'll hide stuff from you. They're not going to tell you what's really going on and what it's really like because they fear the dissonant response. If you achieve resonance with people, the world opens up more fully. Your decisions can be made on the basis of real data, real understanding, as opposed to a curated version of the truth that people think that you can tolerate. And then if you look longer term than that, if you look at some of the data, you're going to have reduced burnout from members of the team. You're going to have more emotional engagement and you're going to have better performance. And there's been kind of studies that have replicated this over the last 20 years. So there is a whole host that comes from Boyatzis himself. There's a lovely quote, which I think is really good. He said that dissonant leaders tend to sort of focus on what they can get out of people, what are the results. And so therefore, they'll only get them in the short term. But a resonant leader focuses on the relationship and the quality of that relationship and almost puts people in a psychological stance that enables them to deliver good performance, which means you'll actually get that good performance over the long term. But it's not performance for performance sake. It's relationship and priming someone to be at their best, emotionally well, psychologically well. That means they'll deliver great performance. So dissonant leaders often push for something that in the end they don't get, but very often it's the relationships that deliver the numbers.
Yeah. Okay. It's hard to go further than that. I am going to ask you one final question. What is the teeniest, tiniest, easiest thing that a leader can do today in their next meeting with someone on their team to bump up their resonance?
Listen. I love the phrase you used earlier from the book, radical listening. And for me, I haven't read the book yet, but I'll give you my interpretation of radical listening, the way that I've always thought of the concept of radical listening. It's listening in a way that you've laid aside your preconceptions, you've laid aside your stereotypes and the box in which you've put someone, and listen well enough to see someone, to really see them, and to spot that gold. And that's the thing. If there was one thing, that's the thing.
Yeah, listen. Oh, that is awesome. Paul, I love spending time with you. Thank you so much for joining What's Possible.
It's a real pleasure and always great to talk to you too, Ilene.
And for those of you who would like to become a more resonant leader, check out Paul on the Silicon Valley Change website, www.svchange.com/Paul. And you can learn more about Paul. We would love to help you show up in the way that makes you and your teams more successful. This podcast is a catalyst for your leadership and well-being journey. To step deeper into exceptional leadership, visit svchange.com for personalized support that will take you to the next level. If you find this show meaningful, please hit that follow or subscribe button. It helps more people find What's Possible organically. If you have questions about anything we've talked about, please drop me a line at podcast@svchange.com. I read every email I get, whether that's an episode idea, a guest recommendation, or just a simple note about how the show has impacted you. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Ilene Schaffer. Thanks for listening. What's Possible is produced by the team at Palm Tree Pod Co. The executive producer is Anthony Palmer. Thanks to Emily Miles and Caitlin Krings for video and digital support. The content for this podcast is created by Ilene Schaffer and the team at Silicon Valley Change.